Good morning, everyone. Welcome to today's show. Thank you so much for joining us. My name is Spencer Walsh on the Wake Up. It's time for everyone to get back to work. We're going to take a look at what's going on at the White House as the deal, and on Capitol Hill as the deal for border security and the push for a border security deal heats up as well. We're going to take a look at Venezuela and the 2020, now even growing here in 2019 presidential race. All right. Yeah, so a lot of stuff to get to today, so let's do it. So really a pretty crazy situation going on, and here's how, ladies and gentlemen, to lose friends and alienate people in 18 days. Here's how it is. Have another government shutdown, which is something that President Trump hasn't ruled out yet again, but there are other options. Here's one of them. It's a possibility of a deal here being hashed out. A gang of 17 Republicans and Democrats from the House and Senate appropriations panels have been charged with the uphill task of negotiating an agreement to prevent a government shutdown by February 15th. Despite the formal reset button, hit Friday, resume, talking under less dysfunctional conditions, Trump himself told Wall Street Journal's Peter Nicholas and Christina Pearson that he thought the committee's chances of successfully negotiating an agreement were less than 50-50. So he really is here anticipating the possibility of using a national emergency. Here's some of the key red lines here. Democrats obviously rejecting the $5.7 billion for the medieval wall along the Trump's border. I don't know why he got red there. But Trump's previous proposal ruled out a permanent path to citizenship for young undocumented immigrants and those dreamers. And Democrats say they're willing to fund a smart wall, but they're unwilling to gut asylum laws to make it happen. Another big unknown is whether Trump is willing to go below the 5.7 figure, and if so, by how much. So it's really a big debate about whether honestly, if it's to prevent another government shutdown, I really don't know what they're going to have to do. I mean, it's going to be very hard to get them passed. It's really going to be hard to get the Democrats, the Republicans, off their $5.7 billion figure, and to possibly go somewhere else and do something else, possibly maybe some money for, quote-unquote, a smart wall, which is also going to, again, serve the same essential purpose in just kind of militarizing the border, making it more dangerous and making it less friendly to people who are trying to cross. Another possibility is Trump declaring a national emergency. The president's commitment is to defend the nation, and he will do it with or without Congress. Trump's chief of staff, Nick Mulvaney, told Fox News Sunday. The Post's Bob Costa and Felicia Sonmay report that Trump's told his advisors over the weekend that declaring a national emergency may be his best option as he scrambles to assert himself in a divided government and secure wall funding, according to 4 people involved in the discussions who were not authorized to speak publicly. That's what they're thinking. They're really seriously weighing it. According to Washington Post reporting, the White House counsel's office, led by Pat Cipollone, has prepared drafts of declarations, and Trump spent much of Thursday night reviewing in the White House residences as he watched TV coverage of the shutdown, according to the White House and 2 White House officials that were not authorized to speak publicly. Another possibility is to fund the government without the wall, which seems pretty unlikely given how central Trump's wall is to his identity. I mean, they're definitely not going to want to sacrifice the wall here for really anything. And I think it's very clear to say that the conservative base is not going to let Trump forget about it. I don't think Trump's going to be anxious to forget about his wall here without a major fight. But we suppose, though, it's possible Trump could go silently into the night to the choir of gloating Democrats, as he did this past Friday by finally agreeing to reopen the government. After following him down this last shutdown rabbit hole, congressional Republicans are unlikely to do the same thing again. That's another very key point. So capitulating here's another thing. Capitulating here on his most prominent campaign promise would not bode well for burgeoning 2020 re-election efforts. All right, that's very important. So he put a lot of federal workers through hell for nothing, said former RNC chairman Mitch Steele. which is very interesting. So, I mean, they didn't even really get the wall, but still 35 days of just absolute chaos and awfulness for these 800,000 people. Another possibility is, yes, we head into another shutdown. After a painful 35 days, they let 800,000 federal workers without paychecks. Most lawmakers agreed legislation needs to be passed as soon as possible to outlaw shutdowns, which is very interesting, stopping them from being used for a negotiating tactic. My thought is, and this is something I actually discussed with someone very recently, because we were talking about, like, we cannot let this happen again, was just like, for example, if they don't have a change to the budget that they want to put in by the end of the fiscal year, then, like, and if they don't agree to that change by the end of the fiscal year, the thing just kind of counts out and doesn't matter. Like you run out of time, and the thing just resets. The same thing just resets to last year. So yeah, it's all very possible. So shutting the government down should be off limits in budget negotiations. Chemical warfare is in real warfare. Senator Lamar Alexander told the New York Times' Carl Hulse. Yet Trump told the Wall Street Journal that another shutdown is certainly an option, and called it doubtful he'd support any deal that give him less than $5.7 billion for the wall. And Mick Mulvaney also confirmed that on Face the Nation. Wall Street Journal NBC News poll that was released yesterday, that was conducted on the tail end of the government shutdown. Well, not looking good for Trump. Approval's really, really high. And it's disapproving now. Percentage is around 55, and the approval ratings for Trump are just around, 38, 39. So yeah, not anything good for Trump at all. So now over here on the Hill, the Democrats finally have the chance to introduce and debate some legislative priorities now that the government has reopened, and it's going to be interesting to see how much they can get done on this. What they're going to really try to do is the wage gap bill. That's one of the things they're going to pursue first. We talked about this last night on the show with the man James Stanley. He came through. We talked about it on Newsflash. Leading Democrats also plan to reintroduce a marquee bill to close the pay gap here between men and women that they've fought to enact for like 20 years. Also, this is very sketchy here, the BDS movement bill. In the Senate, Republicans will try to push through a bipartisan Middle East bill that includes a disputed provision targeting the movement to boycott, divest from, and sanction Israel. With the measure, Republicans will test for fractures really in the resurgent Democratic Party, where Palestinian rights activists has found new voices in House freshmen such as Rashida Tlaib and Ilhan Omar of Minnesota. State of the Union, Pelosi and Trump are going to renew their discussion. Charles Grassley, we went over all this last night with James. Chuck Grassley, Republican of Iowa, is going to convene the Senate Finance Committee to negotiate about prescription drugs, which should be very, very interesting. So that BDS movement bill, though, is probably going to be the biggest one to watch, where Democrats fall on that because it's such a big free speech issue about people can say whether or not they want what they want to do over Israel, and it's going to be a test of actually freedom in this country. Confirmations, big Senate judiciary confirmation, that's going to be something very, very interesting to watch. And, of course, don't forget about the slew of Democratic investigations into Trump and his administration and their never-ending controversies, which Democrats will be kicking off this week. A Washington Post ABC News poll showed yesterday that the American people have some mixed feelings about the investigating of President Trump. And you know what? I think that's only really going to become relevant when the investigations actually get underway. All right. So, yeah. So most Americans support congressional Democrats investigating Trump's foreign ties and possible collusion with Russia, which is all very interesting. Trump's relationship/communications with Vladimir Putin has a 59% support rate for investigating, 61% for suspected financial ties between Trump and foreign governments. All right. Now to global power. Venezuela opposition leaders are in talks with sympathetic civilian and military leaders about overthrowing the government of President Nicolas Maduro, according to self-proclaimed interim president Juan Guaido, according to the Post. Guaido told the Post that that the talks with the military were proceeding behind the scenes. He also hailed the move on Saturday by Maduro's former military attaché to switch allegiance to Guaido. This is, again, the guy who goes to Washington. He's the former military attaché in Washington, and now he's going to Guaido. So he seems really where the wind is blowing. And it's going to be very interesting here to see the reaction of the Venezuelan people and how much of the U.S. had a role in this. And I feel like if it's too much, I think this really seriously here could backfire possibly. Antonio Rivero, a Venezuelan general in exile in Miami, said he'd spoken with the high, middle, and lower officials. Many soldiers are desperate. The armed forces are broken already. So they apparently find fault with Maduro, but remain fearful, quote, of a full break. Knowing a little bit more possibly about Guaido, the 35-year-old National Assembly leader, who last week declared himself Venezuela's legitimate leader, Viola has refreshed a profile of the industrial engineer, who's not really that well known internationally. Anthony Filo of the Washington Post had this to say about him. Guaido's Twitter bio describes him simply as a public servant who's in love with Venezuela. He has had one public post when he was elected legislator in the state of Vargas in 2015. Before that, he was a part of the student movement that protested then-President Hugo Chavez. Son of a commercial pilot and teacher, Guaido grew up in a middle-class family, one of 8 children. His mentor, Leopoldo Lopez, founded the Popular Will Party in 2009 and led a wave of protest in 2014. Before being jailed, he's still under house arrest. Guaido inherited the top post of the Popular Will Party, partly because most of his leadership have been jailed or fled the country. So, kind of when it trickles down, that's what happens. On January 5th, he was named the head of the opposition-controlled National Assembly, which maintained broad recognition internationally despite having been stripped of its powers by Maduro in 2017. Two nations, the U.S. and Cuba, are looming over the Venezuelan crisis right now. Marco Rubio is a vocally anti-Maduro lawmaker. He rejected on Sunday the idea that the U.S. participated in a coup to overthrow the current government. Rubio, speaking on CNN State of the Union, said that the United States is simply supporting other democratic institutions in Venezuela, along with many other countries here in the Western Hemisphere. And yeah, I mean, who possibly would have pushed them into doing that? Could have been the United States? No, not possible. Yeah. So here's the two things. Here's the kind of the Cuba aspect of it. Cuba is a longtime ally of Venezuela and its biggest supporter in the region. The government of President Miguel Diaz-Canel has offered Maduro's unwavering solidarity and called Venezuela's political turmoil the attempt to impose a coup d'etat, a puppet government at the service of the U.S. In the view of Maduro's opponents, however, Cuba is to blame in large part for Venezuela's president's endurance in office, though they point to for the presence of Cuban operatives in the country as spies, intelligence, and political advisors, as well as counterintelligence agents and military trainers. They contend that they have propped up Maduro to a large degree. So that's all very interesting stuff. Finally, we're heading outside the Beltway to the 2020 race, as Kamala Harris and Howard Schultz shared the spotlight on Sunday night for very different reasons. A crowd of 20,000 people gathered to support Harris's really official presidential campaign loss in her hometown of Oakland, California. Harris delivered a very interesting speech touching on topics from Medicare to all to middle-class tax cuts and tuition-free college, frequently evoking her own history as a child of 2 immigrants and a criminal prosecutor who spent her life fighting for the people. That claim is, again, going to be very much in dispute when we really get to the general election. If Bernie decides to run, this past Friday night, it was reported that Bernie decided to run. Her speech, which called for moral clarity, was praised. Harris is among the candidates Trump's White House had shared some concerns about, according to Alex Burns, Jonathan Martin, and Maggie Haberman. Trump is especially fixated on 2 well-known Democrats, speaking frequently about Joe Biden, who Trump regards as the most dangerous potential opponent, of course, Senator Elizabeth Warren. Some of his advisors are preoccupied with the other 2 would-be challengers, who offer a starker generational contrast with the very old president, Senator Kamala Harris of California, and Beto O'Rourke, the Texas Senate candidate. So no mention of Trump directly, but there were some